Monday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great weekend. The NFL new league year, 10 days, 2 weeks away. Teams can start negotiating with free agents. You'll also hear some trade rumors and the likes. A former Browns quarterback, Bernie Kosar, was talking about his thoughts on the Browns going back to, quote, Kevin Stefanski's style of offense.
And I know there's debate to whether he should call plays or not. I think he should call plays. I love his offense. I think it's perfect for a young quarterback to come in. And now we're going to have a clarity of who we are and what we are and an offensive personality, whether people like it or not. I think it's a really one of the best personalities given what's going on in the NFL right now to groom a young quarterback. So I actually am higher this year going into the season.
And again, Browns really didn't have an offensive identity a season ago. This also from Jeremy Fowler, ESPN. These are the guys that are veterans that are on the Browns' radar. Kirk Cousins, we've known that. Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, names to watch as veteran options for the Browns relative to free agency, potentially trade. Zach Jackson, Athletic Browns beat reporter, is hearing that Cam Ward is starting to separate himself as the QB1 and that Shedeur Sanders closer to a second-round pick as opposed to the number 2 overall pick. Again, it's the season where you hear all kinds of things, remains to be seen. But along those lines, take a look at this. This is the last 3 Heisman Trophy winners compared to Cam Ward through 9 games of their senior season, last season in college. So Ward had 3,333 yards, 33 touchdowns. Man, that's a lot of threes. 8 300-yard games. Jaden Daniels, a little bit more on the yardage, same number of total touchdowns, less 300-yard games. Caleb Williams, little less total yardage, 32 total touchdowns, 5 300-yard games. And Bryce Young for Alabama back in 2021. Less yardage, less touchdowns, fewer 300-yard games. So when you look at it through that lens, Cam Ward stacks up production-wise. Now, NFL evaluation is different, granted, but it is kind of eye-opening to show you Cam Ward was an effective college quarterback. Tony Grossi came out and has said he thinks Cam Ward is the guy that the Browns should draft at number 2 if he's there. Question is, what should they do if Cam Ward is not there at number 2?
If you had to pick one or the other, Shedeur or Jackson Dart at 2, I would pick Dart, okay? Wow. And you would probably get annihilated for it by experts, but I would take him. Now, I have
Tony,
no idea what
it's
the Browns
risky business if you pass on Shedeur and you go down and you don't get your Jackson Dart and you come away with –
Well, that's why if you pass him, you may never see him again.
But you want Ward first and foremost.
Absolutely.
And again, that's kind of the talk post-combine is Cam Ward has separated as QB1 in most teams' minds. Well, the Myles Garrett rumors continue to persist. Browns say they're not trading him. Garrett says he's not playing. Bills want him, reportedly. They are going to aggressively pursue a trade for Myles Garrett. That phone call is likely at this point going to be like, yeah, we really like Josh Allen. Love the Myles Garrett for Josh, and that's the end of that conversation. So we'll see where that goes. Again, any playoff team is going to have to give you probably 3 first-round picks because Andrew Berry's not in a hurry to trade them. That will develop as things go. The Bengals will franchise tag T. Higgins again for a second straight year. That means that they will have to pay him around $26 million for this year. Hoping to get a long-term deal done with him. Jamar Chase likely to get over $40 million a year. They did release one of their starting guards, Alex Kappa, saves them $10 million in cap space. But again, a second consecutive year where T. Higgins will be franchise tagged. He will make at least $26 million a year. Trying to work on a long-term deal, and Jamar Chase, again, wants to reset the non-quarterback market. So the Bengals have a lot of work to do in the offseason. Cavs and Blazers yesterday. Cavs fell behind by a ton early and then rallied to play pretty well. Ty Jerome hit a three-pointer at the end of the third quarter, and we will just Ty Jerome played really well, had 25 points, 20 points for Evan Mobley. DeAndre Hunter had 32 points. Cavs rallied to win it in overtime, 133 to 129. Kenny Atkinson talked about that win for the Cavs.
It's just sports psychology, human psychology. Come off a huge win. Now you got to play a hungry, evolving team, a team that's playing really good basketball, 11-4. Over their last 15, we come out, not focused and not high energy. It's kind of normal what happened. But for us to make that comeback, because I didn't think we were going to win the game. I really did, and I said this is one of those games we just don't have it. But like Dan said, I think DeAndre really kind of took us from the abyss and got us the W.
And DeAndre Hunter, 32 points in that win for the Cavs. So this is kind of interesting. According to basketball history, teams have to win 40 games before they lose 10 to have a legitimate chance and be considered genuine championship contenders. This year, the Cavs made the cut, currently at 50-10. So that's interesting as well. Guardians switch hitting shortstop Brian Rocchio really getting it done. In spring numbers, 6 of 12, 2 runs scored, 4 doubles, 2 runs batted in, a walk, no strikeouts, and a stolen base as he is hitting 500.
I think our front office did a
so
great
he
job
continues to produce and play pretty well. Brian Rocchio getting it done, really started in the postseason and has continued. We got a little ahead of ourselves, so plenty of competition for the back end of that rotation. Bibby's going to be there. Likely Luis Ortiz and Ben Lively. The 4th and 5th spots in the rotation still up for grabs, and really Guardians have plenty of guys that can claim those. Carl Willis, the Guardians pitching coach, with the timeline to have those decisions.
I think our front office did a great job of identifying, bringing in a couple guys from outside the organization. You mentioned Slade, Velasquez, Colby Allard has been impressive in a couple outings. And within, young man Nick Nikhazy, Doug Nikhazy, sorry, who's been very, very impressive. So, we tell the guys, and it's true, you're not going to make the team your first start, your second start. It's early in camp. At the same time, we're always evaluating not only what we see, but how they react to whatever may happen. And, it's the 2nd of March. And so it's easy to say it's early, but opening day is 25 days away. So here very soon, we're going to have to start really digging a little deeper to figure this out, and they know that.
And really, Guardians have a number of options to fill out that rotation, and some of the guys that do not find their way into the rotation, like Nikhazy, who is a left-handed pitcher, could end up in the bullpen. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We turn our attention to the Browns. Scott Petrak from the Chronicle Telegram, brownzone.com. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
the new Monopoly Bonus Spectacular family of scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, you can uncover a spectacular amount of winnings. With 5 games from $1 to 20, multipliers from 5 times to 100 times, over $113 million in total cash prizes, and chance bonuses. What you find under a greenhouse could change everything.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We turn our attention to the Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, love the show. Just have a question. Is the report true that the Browns really have interest in Daniel Jones? Unless you're aiming for, like, the first pick of next year's draft, why in the world would you think that Daniel Jones is the good veteran bridge quarterback? The dude was trash in New York. He had one decent season, got a contract, and was let go the next season because he sucks. But, you know, that's how the Cleveland Brown brass works. Take the crappiest player available, and Daniel Jones would be a Cleveland thing to do. I just think that's the dumbest thing I've ever read, that they really have interest in him. Just want to hear your thoughts. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak from the Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Scott, I would assume the talk about Daniel Jones is true. I haven't heard his name as much as Kirk Cousins. Have heard him a little bit. I'm not as down on him as the caller. Everything is kind of relative. He did lead him to the playoffs one year. Was a high draft pick. He's kind of athletic and has a decent arm.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that you could get him to figure something out. And I don't think you have to look any further than the Sam Darnold and what he did with the Vikings last year. You know, the caller probably would have thought the same thing about Sam Darnold last year, and I would have too. You know, he hadn't done anything with the Jets, bounced around, and then he winds up with a good quarterback coach and a good coach and wins 14 games with the Vikings. So I think that's the optimistic template with Daniel Jones. Now, I don't think you bring him in and you guarantee him a starting job. I don't think you bring him in and it keeps you from drafting a quarterback at number 2. But you need some veterans, at least one veteran in this quarterback room. And it's a thin class, and he certainly is part of that class to be discussed. So, yeah, you know, I mean, Kirk Cousins has started way more games, won way more games, but Daniel Jones is on that list.
Yeah. Do you think the Browns take, and I know you've had this in your mailbag, everybody, do you think they take a quarterback at 2?
I do. I don't think it's probably not known right now, even within the organization, and I don't know if it's a slam dunk. But for me, it's as simple as they have a desperate need for a quarterback. They're at the top of the draft, which is the best place to get a quarterback. And if you like somebody at number 2, enough. And I don't think you have to love him. You know, I don't think you have to have him maybe in your top 5 on your draft board. But if you think that he has the potential to be a long-time starting quarterback who ranks in the top 10 in the league, if he can be your long-term answer, then I think you got to take him. And I believe Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders both fit that bill, so you'd be able to get one of them. And I kind of think the Browns agree with that.
All right, Bernie Kosar, you know, last guy that the Browns had that, you know, has been considered a franchise quarterback. On Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, this from ESPN Cleveland.
Like, they could just stay settled. Their feet are settled. They're not moving. And they make perfectly
You
well.
did that pretty well, Tim.
I wasn't as good as them. I actually think they're better at that than me. And in Kevin Stefanski's offense, God, do I like both of those guys. And
Wow.
I have really high expectations of those two.
All right, so let's. I know you wrote an article Shedeur Sanders, and both those guys, I thought handled themselves really well at the Combine. I thought both of them sounded like guys that veterans would rally around. You wrote an article about Shedeur saying he was confident he could turn the Browns around. Take us through that.
Yeah, so, he gets the question, and it was reminiscent of Baker Mayfield in 2018. Got a similar question, gave a similar answer about, hey, I'm the guy to turn around a franchise that's been bad for a long time, a franchise that hasn't had a franchise quarterback in forever. I mean, you mentioned Bernie. And I think that's the attitude you need to have if you're coming into a spot like Cleveland. Now, things have changed since 2018. The Browns are coming off 1-31. Since then, they've been to 2 playoff appearances. But they are 3-14, coming off 3-14. They've won 1 playoff game in the last 3 decades. So I think this is a franchise that could use a quarterback to uplift everything. And that was the impression Sanders gave. And he said all you had to do is look at history. And he did it at Jackson State, and he did it at Colorado. I think Colorado had 1 win before he got there. Then it won 4, and then this year it won 9 or 10. And at Jackson State, they won 4, and then with him, they won 23 games over 2 years, I want to say. So he pointed to his past, and I think he believes that his personality and leadership will also take that team to another level, like reshape the culture. Culture is so ambiguous, but that was the gist of it. Reshape and help a losing culture and turn it into a winner.
In your mind, and I've kind of, I thought Cam Ward was equally adept in what he said, and it doesn't matter where you get drafted; it's what you do and getting that second contract, and I think that's the right mindset. Do you think there's been as much separation as here nationally between Cam Ward and Shedeur? I kind of lean that way. I'm just curious your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and to me, that's maybe the question facing the Browns. Now, it doesn't really matter what the separation is across the league or Daniel Jeremiah with NFL Network, right? The separation only matters regarding the Browns. And do they have Shedeur Sanders close enough to Cam Ward to make them both worth the number 2 pick? But if you go big picture, and I think if you interviewed 100 people at the scouting combine, I do think there is a significant gap between Ward and Sanders. And I don't know if it should be that way. And, Bernie obviously doesn't feel that way. And I think you can win with both those guys. And they each have different traits that I think are better than the other guy. Cam Ward throws it better. He moves better. Sanders is more accurate, maybe a better decision maker. So I think there's good and bad to both candidates. But I do think just physically, if you look at Cam Ward, that's where he has a significant edge over Sanders. And I think that's why a lot of the evaluators see a gap growing.
Yeah, that's fair. And you know what? The other thing, and we'll get to your article on Jaylen Milroe. Jaylen Milroe is a guy that's outstanding athlete. The question is, can you get a really good quarterback out of that? And take us through the article you wrote and just kind of your thoughts. He'd love to work with Tommy Rees. And Tommy Rees, he was more productive the year Tommy Rees worked with him than any other year.
Sure. And that's one of the things that is in play here is the Browns obviously need at least 1 rookie quarterback. So if you don't get it at 2, for whatever reason, you like Abdul Carter better, you like Travis Hunter better, whatever it is, then how do you find that young guy? And Milroe is certainly in that next group of guys. Jackson Dart, Will Howard, you could go through the list that you could get, late 2nd or 3rd round. So can you piece it together like that? That's something the Browns also have to consider. Now, Milroe, the Browns will know him as well as any team in the draft because Tommy Rees spent years as coordinator, years as play caller. He knows him. And everything you hear about Milroe, he won the academic Heisman Trophy, among college football players. He's an outstanding runner of the ball. And, probably does that as well as anybody does anything when you look among these quarterbacks. Does anybody throw it as well as Milroe runs? Probably not. So that's significant. Now, can he marry that with the passing ability? And he's got a big arm, but the accuracy suffers. Maybe the decision-making at times still needs to be improved. Like, he needs polish as a quarterback. But when you have a big-time arm and you're an elite runner, that certainly gives an NFL team something to work with and something to say, hey, if you can draft this guy at the spot you're comfortable with and maybe bring him along for a couple years. Is it behind a veteran? Is it behind another rookie? Maybe you can really discover something in him. So I'm intrigued by him. I don't know where's too high to pick him, where you'd have to pick him to make sure you get him and somebody else doesn't. But the Browns will have a ton of information, and if they feel he's the kind of guy that's going to put the work in necessary, I would certainly not be opposed to taking a flyer on him. I don't know if 33 is the right spot, but if you could get him at the top of that third round, I like that.
Yeah, and the other thing, military background, which I'm sure will kind of, parents military, so it's going to be really, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. All right, before I let you go, you wrote another article, and I'm curious, what teams before and after the Browns in the draft are saying about trades and QBs? How does that figure into what the Browns do?
Yeah, I mean, nothing is settled, right? We're March 3rd. The draft's 6 weeks away, 7 weeks away. But I do think it's interesting. I stood there and listened to the Giants GM, Joe Shane, and they have the number 3 pick, or the number 3 pick. I listened to the Titans GM, the new GM, they have the number 1 pick. And I certainly got the sense that the Titans are willing to move down. Now, they need a quarterback as badly as the Browns do. Maybe the pressure to win right away isn't quite there, so they can kick the can down the road a little bit, stockpile some draft picks. And I got the sense that the Titans would at least be willing to think about that. Now, maybe it changes and they say, hey, Cam Ward's a guy, you're going to take him number 1. But I think that makes things interesting at the top. Could the Browns move up from 2 to 1 and say, hey, they love their quarterback, they want to take him at number 1, and all they have to do is move up 1 spot. Do you have to keep the Giants from jumping over you to get to number 1 to take Cam Ward or Sanders if that's the guy that the Giants like? So I think it's really interesting. The Giants are open to doing anything. They need a quarterback as badly as the Browns and the Titans. Now, I do think the Giants might go veteran quarterback route, which would probably remove them from the discussion to leapfrog the Browns. They tried to go after Matthew Stafford, couldn't get him. But if they get Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think they double up and take a quarterback at 3 or trade up to number 1. But I do think it's really fluid at the top, and that could determine how things play out for the Browns.
Yeah. The other thing that would be interesting, what would it take to go from 2 to 1? Wouldn't think it would be much. Would it be Would it be a late, that second, third round pick?
Yeah, you know what? It depends. So if the Giants offered next year's number 1 to move up 2 spots, then I don't think the Browns would give up that. But if the Giants are just willing to offer whatever it is, second or third round pick, the Browns can go lower because then the Titans aren't in any danger of not getting their player at number 2. And maybe they could trade down again. So, yeah, I think you always have to be careful when you're only moving up 1 spot. And I flash back to that Trent Richardson draft where it felt like the Browns gave up way too much to go from 4 to 3. And the Bears did that when they went up to get Mitch Trubisky too. So you have to be careful about that, but it shouldn't be too much.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Action-packed excitement returns to Rocket Arena. The 2025 Mid-American Conference Basketball Tournament, presented by Credit Union One, returns March 12th through the 15th. Pulses will rise and hearts will race as the men and women of the MAC put it all on the line. Tickets are on sale now at rocketarena.com. MAC Tournament Basketball. Be there!
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Love the show. Long-time viewer. I just have a quick question for you. What do you think of the Browns possibly using their early draft picks, getting some playmakers, and then packaging a couple picks or a pick and maybe a player like a Greg Newsome and calling New England about getting Joe Milton? He played a little bit last year. He looked good. So you're getting a guy still on his rookie deal. And if you still want him to sit a year behind a veteran, you can do that. But, he's got some experience and he's growing. So just want to hear your thoughts. Go Browns. Woo, woo, woo.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I saw Milton played the final regular season game, and I watched a good portion of that, and I liked him. They need playmakers. I'm not sure how it would depend on how they view Milton. Milton's coming off an injury last year. That's kind of why he fell where he did. So it would be interesting to see.
Yeah, it certainly would be. You know, I know he's raw. He's got a huge arm. He's a good athlete. He's raw. So, you know, do you project him as an eventual starter in, 26, 27? I don't think it solves your quarterback problem, but it can certainly be one of the options. And I think unless the Browns take a guy at 2, then it's all about options. That veteran option, whether it's Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins or drafting a guy later in the draft, second or third round or fourth round, and then getting these guys in that room and hoping someone emerges. And that's where I feel Joe Milton would be a part of that. Maybe that's paired with the young guy at number 2 and he just becomes your backup. But there's certainly things to like about him.
Yeah, and it would be intriguing. I know he was on the Browns' radar last year. We remember those talks, so it would be interesting to see. This kind of goes with what we were talking about relative to playmakers. So you have Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman in the receiving room. Take a look at the production. Other than that, David Bell, 41 receptions, 408 yards, 3 touchdowns in 3 seasons. Michael Woods, who has been hurt a lot, 12 receptions, 110 yards in 3 seasons. Jamari Thrash, only 3 catches, 22 yards in 2024. And even, Cedric Tillman has about 5 or 6 games where he's been productive. That wide receiving room needs an injection of some guys that can threaten a defense with the ball in their hand.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Now, there's a chance they bring back Elijah Moore on a cheap contract and, he fits in as your, 3 or 4, and at least he's had some success in this league to whatever degree. But yeah, there's no doubt. And you can decide or you can argue about if you need a number 1 and Judy's your 2, or you need a number 2 behind Judy's your 1. Whatever it is, I think you need a starting caliber receiver and then some depth on top of that. And whether that's a combination of veterans and rookies, I definitely think the Browns need to improve that group. And it certainly is more important given the possibility of having a rookie quarterback as a starter. You want to make life as comfortable as possible for that rookie quarterback, and that means giving him options, weapons and guys to throw to and guys that can catch the ball and then run after catch, all those things. You got to support your rookie quarterback with protection and playmakers. And the Browns need help at receiver, they need help at running back, and they need help at tight end.
So along those lines, Travis Hunter, and I know you wrote an article, he came out and said he wants to play both wide receiver and cornerback. I'm not sure I'd let him do that. The Browns came out and said they view him as a wide receiver, which I thought was kind of interesting as well. Take us through the article and just your thoughts on him doing both.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think Hunter is only considered for the first or second pick in the draft or top 5, wherever, because he can do both. As a receiver by himself, he's really good, and he's electric with the ball in his hands. I don't know if he's a top 5 pick. I would say the same at corner. He's really good at corner. I don't know if he's a top 5 pick, but when you combine those skills and the ability to play both sides, which he did at a crazy high level at Colorado, all of a sudden you're talking about a guy who could be a generational talent, a guy deserving of a top 5 pick. So I think any team that drafts him will have a plan to use him on both sides of the ball. Where the disconnect, let's call it, between the teams and Hunter is how much you use him on that second side of the ball. And to me, if you started him at corner, you could figure out a way to play him 15 or 20 snaps a game at receiver. That doesn't seem outlandish to me. It feels like you can coach a guy up for those 20 snaps. We see all the time the third and fourth receivers, that's how many snaps they play. So that doesn't feel kind of like out of the ordinary to me. Now, the other way, if you see him as a receiver, which Andrew Berry said they do because his ball skills are his superpower, it seems a little less likely to me to play him full-time at receiver and then say, we're going to play 30 snaps at nickel. Like, you don't see a lot of guys where corner is their second job. So I think that's interesting. I don't know if that means the Browns wouldn't take him that high because they primarily see him as a receiver and maybe there'd be less value in the subset of cornerback. But where Hunter said is, I can do both, and I want to do both full time. I did it at Colorado, and he and Pat Shurmur, his coordinator on offense at Colorado, who I talked to last week, said things are slower in the NFL. And that doesn't mean the players aren't slower. The game is slower. There's less hurry up. The timeouts are longer. There's more timeouts where aerobically they both feel like Hunter could probably play both sides almost full time like he did in college, and it could be easier at the NFL level. So, I think you got to be careful about injury. He's not the biggest guy in the world. The contact, you're wearing your hamstrings down. It's a longer season, right? 17 games. I think all those are a factor where he's not going to play 60 snaps on both sides of the ball, but there probably is a happy medium to be found. And in order for him to be as valuable as a top 5 pick, I do think you have to find that combination offense-defense.
Yeah, the physical nature of the NFL and you touched on it. I didn't see his exact weight. He was a little bit bigger than I thought he would be. In a football uniform, he looks kind of slender. He looked a little thicker than I thought he would be, but I worry about, again, Big 12 is just fine. It's not the NFL. It's not the SEC. It's not even the Big 10. 70 snaps, 60 snaps of NFL football, I don't see how anybody makes it through a full season these days.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think he might have weighed in at 188, which is
a little bit bigger.
A good number for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's say you're on offense and you catch 10 balls a game, right? Let's assume you're getting tackled 10 times, and then you're blocking, and then if you're playing corner, you got to come up and take on an offensive lineman. So, and then tackle a running back at full steam. So it's difficult. I do think it will have to be managed, but it's going to be, he's going to play both. It's just a matter of how much and how teams work out that balance. And I don't know, the Browns seeing him as a receiver kind of makes me think twice about how much they would use him at corner.
Scott Patrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Patrick from the Chronicle, Telegram, and BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. A few things today. First and foremost, you want to turn the Browns franchise around. Tell Jimmy and D has them to quit meddling and let Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski do their jobs. And two, I'm starting to lean towards Cam Ward in the draft. What are you thinking? Or maybe trade back no further than 6 and see what we can come up with. Give me your thoughts, Dave. Love you, brother. You and that family. Be safe, and God bless you, brother.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I'm, after the combine, I started I'm kind of leaning more and more towards Cam Ward. I haven't gone back and looked at highlights or any of that. When I watched him during the year, there were throws where it's like, man, how'd he do that? And then there were throws going, why did he do that? And there's 4 or 5 of those a game where it's like, ugh. But the more I hear him, the more I think he's got his head on pretty straight.
Yeah, I do think that's a fair knock on him, Dave, and that's what I've heard consistently. Now, when I watched him, I didn't see a ton of that. I know he had a rough first half against Cal, but then came back and let him out of a hole, and they beat Cal. He kind of put him in the hole, and then he let him out of the hole. I think he only threw 7 interceptions all year, so it's not like he was turning it over a ton. He clearly likes to make tight throws or big time throws into tight windows. Whether or not he likes it or not, you saw it over and over. And I saw plenty of times where that throw got where it was going because he's got a big arm, because he had good accuracy and put it where it needed to be. And that's a trait that a lot of guys don't have. And I couldn't get past it. Like, I kept coming back to that when I watched him. And I'm a sucker for a big arm, and he's got that. Again, there's plenty of guys with big arms that it doesn't translate, or it's not enough. You can have a big arm, but it doesn't matter if you're making bad decisions. It doesn't matter if you're inaccurate. So now I don't think he made a ton of bad decisions. I don't think he was inaccurate. So that's why I like him, and I think that combined with a skill set where he can run the ball if needed, he can scramble. He's a bigger guy, thicker guy. But he said, I got to live in the pocket. He goes, that's how I'm going to be successful. So I like that about him. I like that he knows he needs to make decisions in the pocket and win from the pocket. But the arm talent is what separates him. It's just a matter of, is the rest of the package, does it support the arm talent? And the more you talk to people, I think the answer is yes. I think he's a big-time leader, and I think he's a smart quarterback. And you put all that together with a big arm, and that spells good things.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm thinking, what happens is there isn't a throw that he thinks he can't make because of that arm, and that I think that's what gets him into trouble sometimes is the arm talent is. It's like, don't throw it through the keyhole. We got a window over here that you can do. You don't have to hit the keyhole. You also wrote about Joel Bitonio and the retirement. The more I hear from Joel Bitonio, I think he's back for a year. Are you getting that sense, or do you think retirement's still on the table?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know ESPN said that the Browns are optimistic. That was one of the kind of things coming out of the combine is the Browns don't know for sure, but are optimistic that Joel will come back. When I talked to him at a Browns coach's clinic the Saturday before the combine, so 9 days ago, and I walked away thinking, man, he might retire. And it was a different vibe than I had at the end of the season. Now, he didn't commit to anything. He didn't say which way he was leaning. That was just me reading the tea leaves. So I could be wrong. I hope for the Browns' sake I'm wrong, because I think they really could use Joel back, and it would be another big hole on an offseason with plenty of holes to fill. That would be another one added to the list. So I don't know. I think we're going to have the decision within the next week as free agency gets ready to start. He just feels like a time where you should let the Browns know if they might need to find a starting guard somewhere. So I think we're going to find out, but I don't have a great sense, Dave, but I would not be shocked if he did retire.
Yeah, that's again, the people that you talk to around with that thought he might be back, but yeah, that's interesting. I was not at that event. All right, from your mailbag, aging roster, no cap room, not close to the top three: KC, Baltimore, Buffalo. What's a good reason the Browns shouldn't trade Myles Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a popular question, and I completely understand it. But I've been pretty consistent. I don't think a rebuild is necessary. I think if you find the right quarterback, and maybe that's Cam Ward, maybe that's Shedeur Sanders, maybe it's a combination of those guys and Kirk Cousins, whatever it is. If you find the right quarterback and make a couple improvements to the roster, key spots, I think you got to figure out left tackle. We talked about receiver. We talked about running back. Then I think this roster otherwise is good enough to win 10 games. And that's how the NFL works. I don't think the Browns are a bottom feeder team in the NFL. I go back to 2023 with a lot of the same guys. They won 11 games and made the playoffs. I think that is doable again with much better play at quarterback. The Browns, they shouldn't turn the ball over nearly as much as they did last year. They should turn it over as a defense, force more turnovers. That's a little bit cyclical, and that makes a huge difference in wins and losses. So I just think the Browns are better than 3-14 with the right quarterback. It can boost them. And if you think you can win 10 games, then I certainly am not trading the best player on my team for what I don't think would be proper value. I don't think you're getting proper value back for Myles Garrett. I would not go into some teardown. They have the number 2 pick in the draft. Like that's the point of a teardown, is to get that kind of pick. So I think they're already kind of there by mistake or by happenstance. And Dan Lobby from cleveland.com pointed that out, and I completely agree with him. So You already have the number 2 pick. You already got 11 draft picks. I don't think you need to go out of your way to try to rebuild, and I think you're a better team with Myles Garrett.
Yeah, and to your point, you have the draft capital. You're picking near the top in a draft that is pretty deep at running back, which you need, pretty deep at wide receiver, which you need. What other position groups, and again, I know this from your mailbag, what other position groups do you think they need, and are there any where you think they don't really need to address? I guess it's even more important.
Well, yeah, I mean, that part's a little scary, and if you want to say, hey, this team needs a rebuild, you go position by position. You say, well, they're not really set at a lot of spots. I would argue cornerback. You got Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson Jr., Greg Newsome II, who, maybe they try to trade him. But right now, he's on the roster. You have Cam Mitchell. That's a solid foursome that I don't know if there's a necessity to try to improve that group. So I like that. I think offensive line, let's say Joel Bitonio comes back. Then left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. Yes, they probably need to go get a left tackle, but could you get by with DeJuan Jones at left tackle? Maybe. I mean, maybe he's the answer. And I think if you're trying to take steps with, salary cap constraints and all these holes, you're going to need guys to step in and step up and fill positions that look like right now there's a void there. And I think DeJuan Jones at left tackle could be it. But if Bitonio comes back, either way, you have 4 out of 5 or maybe 5 out of 5. You have a couple backups there already. So those are the 2 positions I would go, okay, those are pretty set. But when we talk about need, you always need to get deeper on D-line, and I'd say D-tackle is a priority. And tight end, I think they're going to go more multiple tight end sets. We don't know the future of Dave Njoku beyond 2025, and it's a deep tight end class. I would not be opposed to taking a tight end in the 2nd or 3rd round, pairing him with Njoku for the short term, having him be the heir apparent to Njoku. I kind of like that idea, especially with this class having as many quality tight ends as it does.
Scott Petrak, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Brownzone.com on the internet. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle Telegram. Always insightful Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out, continue talking Browns. Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
With the new Monopoly Bonus Spectacular family of scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, you can uncover a spectacular amount of winnings. With 5 games from $1 to 20, multipliers from 5 times to 100 times, over $113 million in total cash prizes and chance bonuses. What you find under a greenhouse could change everything.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
As far as in the draft, if we're going to get Shedeur, I believe that we should get a wide receiver or pieces that he feels comfortable playing with. And I believe that we should get his teammate from Colorado, LaJohntay Wester. He's very, very shifty, and I think he's a great receiving piece. From my understanding, Elijah Moore won't be there. I think he'll be a free agent after this, so I think he'll be a great replacement. And I feel like he can really be a gadget player along with Jerry Jeudy and Devin Njoku, and I feel like he would be another threat.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, Browns need playmakers. I think they need higher level, higher ceiling than the guys that were at Colorado, not named Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just the unfortunate just the reality, and it goes back to things I've been talking about when it comes to Shedeur Sanders this whole time. I feel like outside of Travis Hunter, there are not a lot of guys on the Colorado roster that are going to be drafted high. I look at, LaJohntay Wester, Jimmy Horn Jr. Those are guys that I think are kind of marked for round 6 or 7 in this draft, or maybe UDFAs. And if you're the Browns, I believe you got to go early and go get some skill players. I think number 2 at this point, I really like both quarterbacks. Just get whichever, if one's gone, grab the other, and then maybe take another receiver with one of those next 2 picks. I mean, you got to add some offense and you got to add some skill players, guys who are going to make plays anytime you get them the football. Again, this was the worst scoring offense in the NFL in 2024. You got to find a way to get young playmakers on rookie contracts for these next couple seasons.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's nobody, even Jerry Jeudy, who, if you're a defensive coordinator, who do you look at on the Browns offense and go, man, if he gets the ball in space, we're in trouble. Maybe Jerry Jeudy, maybe David Njoku. That's about it. You need a couple more of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way football's trending. It's an offensive-minded game, and I keep talking about this. Andrew Berry, obviously he hasn't had a lot of high picks, but 6 top 75 picks as GM. He's only used 2 on offense. Only one of those has been a skill player, and he's going to have 3 picks in the top 75 this April. I think he's got to use at least 1, if not 2, on some skill players and add some high-end prospects into this group.
I think they need to replenish the offense at the skill position, hopefully. And this is a good running back class, it's a good tight end class, and it's a decent wide receiver class. So I think this might be the year to do that. Here's some other thoughts on Shedeur Sanders. This is from ESPN.com. NFC team quarterback coach doesn't play on time really at all. A lot of weight in the pocket and throw to the open man. That man's usually standing in an open zone. AFC West scout game manager, ceiling Jared Goff. That's it if he gets in a scheme that speeds up his decision making. Again, this is the time of year where you hear all kinds of things. I will say the more I look at Cam Ward, I think there's a little bit more of a gap than I did before between Cam Ward as QB1 and Shedeur Sanders at QB2. What are your thoughts on that gap between Ward and Sanders?
I'm kind of surprised it's opened up as big as it has during the combine, especially considering the fact that neither guy threw a single pass in Indianapolis. I mean, it just seems like it was pretty close between those guys, and then all of a sudden, we get to the combine. Obviously, it's the first time you get to hear from scouts and executives, and you hear all the rumors that there's a much bigger gap than you realize. And I think we always have to remember that this is the silly season. It's going to last until the end of April when teams have to make their decisions and they have to make picks happen. So, I mean, I take a lot of this stuff sometimes with a grain of salt because, I mean, there's always motives, I think, for things that are said or, why, certain guys move up or down boards, why guys are linked to certain teams. It's not always intentional. I mean, it's not always because they want to take that player. It's because they want to see if they can just get some great value out of it. And I think Shedeur Sanders for the last week and a half has really, taken a lot of hits for really almost no reason. Yeah, and that's no disrespect to Cam Ward. I think, I've said before, he's got a higher ceiling. And, talking to Daniel Jeremiah about a week and a half ago in his conference call, he talked about how he would take the guy with the higher ceiling. And right now that's Cam Ward. But to me, Shedeur Sanders is still, worth the second overall pick. If he's still worth the 3rd pick to the Giants or the 6th pick to the Raiders, then he's worth the 2nd pick in my book.
All right. We'll get back to that in a minute. We'll take a look at a mock draft coming up next segment. But this is interesting. 2025 line class is arguably the most athletic offensive line group in recent memory. This 33rd team, and those are the guys that are former NFL executives and scouts, since 2003. So 2003, the 2025 O-line group is ranked first in height at over 6'5", second in weight, 315, first in 40 times. So they're bigger, they weigh more, and they're faster. They're also more athletic. That's by their verticals and their broad jumps. So what you are getting, and it's what football's doing, bigger, faster, stronger. It's this offensive line group. So by those metrics, it is a good year to need offensive linemen like the Browns do. And what they're saying is there's not the higher end guys, but there's guys that you can kind of mold.
Yeah, in a way that kind of feels like the way the draft is. There's only a handful of like super high-end guys, and then once you get past maybe outside the top 10, there's really not much of a gap within the next 20 to 30 guys in that class. So I think there's a lot of variance, and you see with the offensive line, you know, Will Campbell from LSU might be the only guy who is maybe go in the top 10, and after that you have a ton of guys that might go between picks 15 and say 55, for example. Just throwing kind of a number out there. But you know, even looking at some of the guys that were lower ranked guys, you know, we'll get to Diamonds on the Rough later, but there are two guys later in this draft, Logan Brown from Kansas, Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech, who really shined at the combine as lower ranked guys. The fact that you have guys lower down on that end, really impressing with workouts, tells you that there is some depth in athleticism on the offensive line. Although I will say, you know, obviously it's great that these linemen can run 40 yards really better than anybody, but you typically don't want your linemen to run 40 yards. I mean, maybe they do that twice a game, once if something really good happens and once if something really bad happens.
Well, you know, we didn't have them running 40 yards blocking enough last year. That's part of the problem. So maybe that's a trending in the right direction. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Tim talked about it when we return. His Diamonds in the Rough from the 2025 Combine. Sports4CLE will be right back talking Browns with Tim Bielik. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We continue talking Browns and the NFL draft with Tim Bielik from cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. So, Tim, you wrote an article, 2025 Combine Diamonds in the Rough, and you've alluded to it. Let's take a look at some of the guys that you had in this article. You mentioned Logan Brown and Caleb Rogers. One's a tackle interior for Rogers. Tasala from Arkansas. Tootin from Virginia Tech is intriguing. Jalen Conyers from Texas Tech. Then you've got Frazier, Sigel, Asante, Ingram Dawson, and Colin Oliver, edge rusher from Oklahoma State. Of those guys, who kind of opened your eyes? Who do you think makes a lot of sense for the Browns?
I think Michelle Tootin from Virginia Tech really does. I mean, you kind of hinted at him. Set the fastest time among running backs at the Combine in the 40.32. Again, you always kind of take 40 sometimes with a grain of salt, but a 1.49 10-second split tells you he can get up the top speed very quickly. You watch his highlights. This young man is explosive, and I know the Browns kind of could use maybe more power element in the running game considering they have some speed with Jerome Ford, but Tootin is a guy who I think, you know, certainly has shown in a class where, even doing the math of this morning, they had 14 guys run the 40 in sub 4.5, and I think the last 2 years combined was 15. So that tells you that this is a really athletic class, and Tootin was the fastest of all those guys. It's one thing to do it at say 175 pounds or 185 pounds. To do it at 206 is pretty darn good because it tells you got a little strength in there. And in what's a deep running back class, this is the kind of performance I think that can help a guy separate himself and maybe even sneak into the back end of day number 2 in the draft, or if not, maybe he goes early in day 4 if the Browns don't take a running back with one of those 4 picks.
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't be opposed to taking 2 running backs. You mentioned Ford. Ford, to me, is like an ideal third down back. And the other thing we showed last week, there are splits where running him under center, he averages 1.5 yards less than when he's in shotgun. And I think they're going under center a bit more if they go back to Kevin Stefanski's offense.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the idea of, stacking skill players, whether it's getting multiple receivers, multiple running backs, or at least one of each in this draft. I don't think if you're the Browns, you can leave, day two without having a running back. I think there's just so many good ones, even outside the first round. The Ohio State duo, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. You got Amarion Hampton from North Carolina, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Cam Scatterbo from Arizona State. I could just keep listing guys, but there's so many good ones that are going to go in day two of this draft. I think if you're the Browns, it's imperative that you take one on day number two. Obviously, you're not going to take one second overall, but I think you simply have to find a way to lead that Friday night with potentially your number one running back for the next couple seasons.
All right, so this is also interesting. A wide receiver that's second, third round range, 6'4", 214 pounds. Jayden Higgins, Iowa State, had 80-plus targets, 87 receptions, which was sixth with guys with 80 or more targets. 1,185 yards, seventh in the NCAA. Only 2 drops. That's the important thing there. And he can separate, big frame, and is. Those are the kind of guys that you can help a quarterback out with. Separate, big frame.
Yeah, I do think, obviously you compare him with Cedric Tillman, then you have 2 really tall, athletic receivers that you could put on the field at the same time. I loved, with Iowa State, the combination of guys they have, Jayden Higgins and Jaylen Milroe. That's a fun 1-2 combination. And I think with Jayden Higgins, typically something you see with taller receivers is maybe they are not the quickest or they have hand issues. With Higgins, that's not at all the case. The fact that you have a guy who's 6'4", with the ability to separate the way Higgins does, with the fact that he holds on to so many passes. I mean, you pointed out there just 2 drops this season. That is absolutely remarkable for a receiver, especially when you're getting the volume of targets and catches that a guy like Jayden Higgins does. Certainly is going to be a guy that should go easily within the top 75, I think, of this draft. It's going to be an interesting idea to see where the Browns go. They've never under Andrew Berry, they typically haven't gone heavy on one side of the ball or the other. They've leaned more defense, but they try to be more balanced. I still argue they got to go heavy on offense. And I think heavy on skill positions. This is a guy who's in the third round. If, say, they take a running back in the second, if Jayden Higgins is there at pick 67, that'd be a pretty good option for me if I'm the Browns.
I'm with you. They need an infusion of playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. This is a mock draft that post-combine, NFL.com's Lance Zierlein, Lance is the guy that writes all of the reviews and the comps. So he has the Titans taking Abdul Carter number 1 overall, and the Browns taking Travis Hunter, passing on Cam Ward, who has going third to the Giants. Then he does have the Browns trading back into the bottom half of the first round, 33rd pick and an additional pick to the Commanders to get up to 29 to take Shedeur Sanders. So he has Shedeur Sanders sliding all the way to 29. And there have been a number of mock drafts that have come out post-combine who have him late first round, some of them going actually into the second round. I don't know. If Cam Ward's there at 2, I can't see the Browns passing on him. I just can't. Even if they can come back and get Sanders, I think if Cam Ward's there at 2, they take him. I'm more intrigued by them trading up to 1 to make sure they get Cam Ward at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it would just come down, I think, to the price you have to pay to make that move up, whether you give up, say, pick 94 and a 4th-round pick next year, or maybe 2 extra picks in 2026 to make that work. I think it makes sense to do it. I've said before, I really like Shedeur Sanders, but I do feel like Cam Ward in my mind was really kind of starting to be that QB1. Listening to the combine, he really made it a point to talk about how much he believes he's good in the pocket. And I think watching him more, you really start to see that when it comes to Cam Ward. And when you look at the other thing is when you look at all the reporting from the combine, particularly guys like Adam Schefter and all those, basically almost everybody to a man said the Browns are going to take a quarterback. The Browns are going to take a quarterback, that they are almost maybe not boxed into taking a quarterback, because I feel like that's the worst time to take a quarterback. But if there's a consensus guy and he's there at number 2, if you're the Browns, how could you not take a guy like Cam Ward or even Shedeur Sanders, considering where you are? I'm of the opinion, both these guys are going to be good. I think Ward has a chance to be better than Shedeur Sanders. I feel like Sanders is going to succeed in at least some capacity in the NFL, even if it's just at like a Geno Smith level or something like that. I don't think he's going to fail. Cam Ward, I think, has the ceiling to compete with those top guys in the AFC. if he's there at 2, it would be a pretty good sprint to the phones to make that phone call for Cam Ward. And if you're the Browns and you fall in love with him over the next couple of weeks, it makes sense. If you really believe he could be the guy to keep up with everybody else, especially in the AFC North with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, you find a way to move up to number 1, remove all the doubt, and pretty much you just kind of kick your feet up and wait for draft day to come around.
Tim Bielek, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
God, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
You too. Tim Bielek, make sure you check him out, cleveland.com. Really good and insightful stuff, writing about the draft and the draft prospects. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.